Many governments assess so-called sin taxes on items such as alcohol and tobacco. Do these taxes represent good public policy? A recent panel discussion tackled that topic. The event was co-hosted by the John Locke Foundation, Western Carolina University's Center for the Study of Free Enterprise, and the Federalist Society. And we're interviewing panelists to get their take on the issue. In this segment, we welcome Dr. Thad Calabrese, Associate Professor at New York University. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So first of all, we're going to get into the specifics of a chapter that you co-wrote for a book on this topic titled For Your Own Good, Taxes, Paternalism, and Fiscal Discrimination in the 21st Century. But before we get into the specifics of your chapter, in general, your sense of sin taxes and whether they represent good public policy.
It's sort of imposing an ideal of what behavior you think you want from people as opposed to allowing people to make their own decisions. From that perspective and the distortionary effects it has on the behavior of people, I don't find them to be an extraordinarily enlightened form of taxation.
Yeah, so generally the sense that this is not the best way to go. Your specific chapter in this book dealt with the use of these taxes dealing with pensions. Tell us about that.
So my chapter is a little bit of the oddball of the book in that it's not necessarily directed at sin taxes per se, but the chapter focuses on the use of selective taxes. Now, ironically, or incidentally is probably the correct word, some of those taxes are sin taxes that are used to fund pensions. But the bulk of the chapter focuses on an increasing phenomenon in state and local governments who have underfunded pension systems, significantly underfunded. These are not pension systems that are mildly underfunded, such as North Carolina's pension systems, which are actually quite healthy. Comparatively speaking, these are pension systems that are in risk in many cases of running out of money in a few years. And when you think of the intergenerational equity of what that means, it means that prior generations received benefits that they didn't pay for, and that the benefits now have to be paid for by taxpayers who did not receive the benefits. It also means that taxpayers who may be interested in pension reform have a problem. So if North Carolina tomorrow wanted to switch from a defined benefit plan to a defined contribution plan, there might be a little bit of fiscal pain. Pension systems are somewhere around over 90% funded. So there's a small liability that would have to be somehow paid off. But if you were in Illinois and wanted to close the pension system, you would need tens of billions of dollars. And so it effectively, the underfunding effectively removes many significant reform possibilities from current and future taxpayers, which I think is a real problem. The issue of selective taxes with pensions is interesting because, as I said, it tends to be the cities and the states that have not managed their pension systems well. I looked specifically at, in depth, the states of Pennsylvania and Illinois. Obviously, whenever you mention Illinois and fiscal management and health in the same breath, you know you're in for quite the story. But in the case of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania allows municipalities to have their own pension systems. They have thousands of local pension systems, and the state for over 100 years has had a system where commercial insurers pay a premium tax to the state, and then the state distributes the money to the localities, and it's intended to offset the pension contributions of the cities in Pennsylvania. And so what you have is a system where the state was basically collecting money, then sending it to the cities, and there was no connection between the benefits and the financing of the benefits. And so obviously, if you were a city that was funding the pension system, providing benefits that were lower than the maximum amount the state would pay you back for, essentially, you had an incentive to increase benefits to your workforce because it was essentially free. And now you're in a situation where you have systems that are well underfunded, and so then they start doing things like taxing, increasing the sales tax, increasing the a garbage collection tax as another example. Philadelphia, for example, they were supposed to use a tax on soda as part of their pension funding arrangement. And I might be mistaken, I might be misremembering, as they say. I believe they also at one point had a cigarette tax that was supposed to be devoted to their pension system. None of those taxes generated the revenue they suspected, so their poorly funded pension system continued to be poorly funded.
We are chatting with Dr. Thad Calabrese, who's associate professor at New York University, and talking about the use specifically of these specialized selective taxes to help with pension funds. This seems to fit in with the general theme of how these taxes are distorting proper tax policy. When these governments do or take these sort of steps, what kinds of long-term problems does this create?
The selective taxation is usually done as a means of addressing poor management and poor behavior over the past several decades. Either the benefits that are far out of line with affordability and sustainability, or with the unwillingness to levy taxes at a rate that would properly fund the pensions. There's a debate about what properly funding pensions means. However, my particular opinion is that pensions should be fully funded by the people who are consuming the services of the government. That would imply, as I said, that if future generations and future taxpayers wanted to make changes to these systems, they would not be on the hook for money that prior generations failed to put into the system. The history or the experiences with selection taxation have shown, I show in the chapter, have generally not resulted in better funded pension systems. Because the reality is, if you are going to place a fee or a tax on some particular service or good, and you're not going to also reform and address benefit levels, you're basically just throwing dirt into a deeper and deeper hole, and you're not making any progress. So the allure of these taxes is that it can provide some kind of way out of these problems without making a very difficult decision and without having difficult negotiations about whether benefits are excessive, proper, etc. So that's no one who's implemented these. There are I shouldn't say no one. There are very few examples of municipalities that have done this, where they have improved their pension funding. The few that have used these taxes in conjunction with actual reforms, and that's how they improve the funding of their systems.